Hello friends, welcome to this video on hemochromatosis. Hemochromatosis is one of the metabolic liver disease. The metabolic liver diseases, they have been classified into inherited and acquired. Inherited is which are caused by the mutations in the genes. So in that we have three disorders, that is hemochromatosis, Wilson's disease and alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. Whereas in the acquired metabolic liver disease, we have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So this hemochromatosis, it is caused because of abnormality in the iron metabolism. Wilson's is caused because of the abnormality in the copper metabolism. And alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, this is caused because of the defect in the folding of the protein. So it is not transported to the organs where it is required. So in this way, the metabolic disorders, they have been classified. And coming to the topic proper, that is hemochromatosis, this is an iron storage disorder where we have excessive accumulation of the iron in the parenchymal cells of the organs, causing the tissue damage. Now again, hemochromatosis is classified into two types: primary hemochromatosis and secondary hemochromatosis. So primary hemochromatosis is a condition where we have mutations in the genes. It is an inherited disorder. It is inherited as an autosomal recessive disorder. So the condition which has been inherited, we call it as a primary hemochromatosis, whereas if the iron overload is more as a consequence of parenteral administration of the iron, so this condition we call it as secondary hemochromatosis. So before going into the hemochromatosis, let us see what is the normal iron metabolism. In the diet, we will be ingesting about 10 to 20 milligrams per day of the iron. So out of this much of the iron which is present in our diet, our intestinal absorption is only 1 to 2 milligrams per day. So in this 1 to 2 milligrams per day also, the iron lost in a day will be approximately again 1 milligram. Some amount of it is retained. So in the body, actually the total iron body pool is 2 to 6 grams. So this is maintained in a balance by approximately equalizing the iron lost and the iron gain. So here we have the gain which is equalizing the loss, and the iron is lost from the skin, through the sweat and through the intestinal epithelial cells. So this is how the body will be maintaining its iron balance. Now what happens in the hemochromatosis is the iron absorption is increased. So instead of 1 to 2 milligrams per day, the iron absorption becomes 4 milligrams per day. But the iron loss is the same, that is 1 milligram per day. So here we have the more gain than the loss. So the extra amount of the iron which has been absorbed, it starts accumulating in the body. So the accumulation of the iron, when we see, it is about 3 milligrams per day, and as the days pass on, it becomes 0.5 to 1 gram per year, and later on, as the patient reaches the age of 40 years, it becomes 20 grams. So when the accumulation occurs for about 20 grams, then the disease starts manifesting. Before that, the disease will not manifest, the patient will not have the complaints, but once it reaches 20 grams or more, then the patient will have the manifestations. Now coming to the pathogenesis, as I told you, this is an autosomal recessive disorder. Primary hemochromatosis, it is an autosomal recessive disorder. But before going into the hemochromatosis, we should know about the normal iron, how the normal iron is absorbed from the intestine and how it is transported to the liver, and from there how it is transported to the different organs. So the main regulator of the iron absorption is a hepcidin protein. Now this hepcidin protein, it is encoded by the HAMP gene which is present in the hepatocytes. Now this HAMP gene is again influenced by many factors. We'll see that one later. So this HAMP gene, it encodes for the hepcidin, and the name hepcidin is given because it is produced in the liver. So hep is for the liver, and cidin is because it has some bactericidal activities. So because of these two things, the protein which is produced by the HAMP gene is labeled as hepcidin. So the production of the hepcidin is increased by inflammatory cytokines and iron overload, whereas it is decreased by the iron deficiency, hypoxia, and ineffective erythropoiesis. Now the other proteins which will be affecting the production of the hepcidin. One was the HAMP gene, and another thing is what are the other proteins which will be affecting this transcription of the HAMP gene is we have other three proteins like hemojuvelin, we have a transferrin receptor 2, and HFE, high iron Fe, which we call it as HFE. So these three proteins also stimulate the increased transcription of the HAMP, thus stimulating the increased production of the hepcidin. But if we have any mutations in these three genes which are encoding for these three proteins, then we have a decreased hepcidin synthesis. So the mutations of these genes, they play a central role in the pathogenesis of primary hemochromatosis. And that also the adult hemochromatosis is mainly caused by mutations in the HFE, whereas the juvenile hemochromatosis, it is caused by the mutations in the hemojuvelin, or it can also be by the HAMP gene. So HAMP and the HGV mutations we see in juvenile, whereas HFE mutations we see commonly in the adult hemochromatosis. So this is the diagrammatic representation to show you how these proteins control the hepcidin synthesis. So whenever there is an iron overload, these are the iron mediated pathways. Whenever there is an iron overload, the non-parenchymal liver cells, they produce bone morphogenic protein 6. Now this bone morphogenic protein 6 has its receptors on the hepatocytes. So when this protein is produced, it acts in a paracrine way on the adjacent hepatocytes, and it causes integration between this bone morphogenic protein receptor and hemojuvelin. So when you have an interaction between the hemojuvelin and bone morphogenic protein receptor, this integration will cause activation of the SMART pathway. So we have phosphorylation and activation of the SMART pathway. So this SMART pathway, when it is activated, it increases the transcription of the HAMP gene. So when it increases the transcription, there is an increased production of the hepcidin. So this is how the hemojuvelin causes. Now we had another two proteins also, that is high iron, that is HFE, and transferrin receptors. So these two are directly stimulated by the transferrin, which is again stimulated by the iron in the serum. So this transferrin indirectly it stimulates the production of these two proteins, HFE and TFR2. So these two proteins again they cause the activation of the SMART pathway. So again, when this is activated, we have the increased transcription of the HAMP gene and you have increased production of the hepcidin. So in this way, hemojuvelin, HFE and transferrin receptors, the three of the proteins, they act through the SMART pathway to increase the production of the hepcidin. Now another one is the inflammatory mediators, the cytokines, specifically the interleukin 6. It has the receptors on the hepatocytes. So interleukin 6, when it combines with its receptors on the hepatocyte, there is an activation of JAK-STAT3 pathway. Now when this pathway is activated, this also causes increased transcription of HAMP gene. So when there is increased transcription of HAMP gene, again there is increased production of the hepcidin. So in this way they stimulate the production of the hepcidin. But we have a negative pathways also, like the erythropoietic drive. When there is an increased requirement of the iron for the erythropoiesis, then there is the stimulation of erythroferrone molecule. So this one inhibits actually the transcription of the HAMP so that the hepcidin production is reduced. So in this way we have iron mediated pathways and the inflammatory mediators which have a positive effect on the hepcidin synthesis, whereas the inhibitory effects we have through the erythropoietic drive. Now once the hepcidin is produced, what happens next? So hepcidin is synthesized in the hepatocytes. So from here the hepcidin is released into the circulation, and from there the hepcidin acts on the molecules which typically have the molecules ferroportin. Now this ferroportin is nothing but it is a cellular iron efflux channel. So these ferroportin, we see them on the enterocyte, we see them on the macrophages, and we see them on the hepatocytes also. So in the enterocyte, what happens? The dietary iron is absorbed, and this absorbed dietary iron is released into the circulation through the ferroportin. Whereas in the macrophages, we have the senescent RBCs. The RBCs are broken down and iron is released. That iron is again released into the circulation through the ferroportin. Then you have the hepatocytes. So you have the iron storage here from after the absorption, we have the iron storage here. So whenever the iron is required, iron is again released into the circulation through the ferroportin. So in this way, the ferroportin is present on these three cells, enterocyte, macrophage and hepatocytes, and it is useful for transferring the intracellular iron into the plasma. And the hepcidin, which is produced by the liver, it has inhibitory effect on this ferroportin. Now what does this hepcidin do? How does this act? So hepcidin, the production of the hepcidin, which is influenced by HAMP gene, HFE, hemojuvelin, transferrin receptor 2 and interleukin 6. So when the hepcidin is produced, what does the hepcidin do is it goes and combines with the ferroportin. When it combines with this ferroportin, which is a cellular iron efflux channel, the ferroportin gets internalized into the cell in a vesicle. Now in this vesicle, once it is internalized, this ferroportin molecule, it undergoes the lysis. So if the ferroportin molecule is lysed, then the iron which is absorbed by the intestinal epithelial cells, it cannot move out into the plasma. So whatever is absorbed, it starts accumulating within the intestinal epithelial cells. So similar, it happens in the macrophage also. The iron is released into the cytoplasm, but because of the hepcidin, the ferroportin is internalized and it is lysed up, so we don't have any efflux channels. So again, iron gets accumulated in the macrophages also. The same procedure goes on. Now if you have a low hepcidin, then what happens? The ferroportin will not be internalized. So the iron, whatever is absorbed, it will be released into the plasma. Whereas if you have a high hepcidin levels, then what happens? All the ferroportin molecules will be internalized. And once they are internalized, then what happens? They undergo the proteolysis. So there are no ferroportin molecules on the surface for the transfer of the iron. So when the transfer doesn't occur, iron starts accumulating within the cell itself. So this accumulation we see typically in the enterocytes, hepatocytes and macrophages. So this is the effect of low hepcidin and the high hepcidin levels. Now what hemochromatosis is, as I told you, we have mutations of this either the HAMP gene or the genes which are responsible for the production of hemojuvelin, transferrin receptors and HFE. And as I told you, HFE is the one which is most common mutation in the adult forms of the hemochromatosis. Now HFE gene, it is located on the short arm of the chromosome 6 at 6p21.3, and it encodes a molecule that governs the intestinal absorption of the dietary iron by regulating the hepcidin synthesis. It controls the hepcidin synthesis. In that way, it controls even the intestinal absorption of the iron. Now the mutations what we see in the HFE, the most common are the two mutations, out of which the most common mutation is the tyrosine, which will be substituting the cysteine at the 282 position. And another less common is we have the aspartate, which will be replacing the histidine at the 63 position. So these two are the most common mutations. Tyrosine replacing cysteine at 282 and aspartate replacing the histidine at the 63 position. So these are the mutations what we see in the HFE gene. So when you have a mutation in this, hepcidin synthesis is reduced, so you have to open up ferroportin channels. So whatever iron is absorbed, it will be released into the circulation, and enterocytes will be going on absorbing the dietary iron and transporting them into the plasma. So once the serum levels increases, the extra iron, it starts depositing in the different tissues and the organs. So when it enters into the tissues and the organs and in the cells, there will be activation of the Fenton's reaction. If you remember the cell injury, where we have the free radical injury, there we have the Fenton's reaction. So in the free radicals, actually H2O2 will be converted into the hydroxyl ions, which are the free radicals, when there is increased availability of the metallic ions. So even in iron and the copper, they produce this Fenton's reaction. So in the cell, when there is increased availability of the ferrous, then the Fenton's reaction occurs and we have increased production of the free radicals. Now these free radicals, they cause cell damage, death, and later on fibrosis occurs in the organ. So this, because of the fibrosis, finally we have the organ damage. So this organ damage we see in the men by the age of 50 years. But in the women, we see 10 to 20 years after the menopause, because during the menstrual bleeding, the iron, some of the iron will be lost. So manifestation occurs at a later time when compared to the men. Now when we see the morphology, so the iron deposition in the different organs, what the changes occur in the different organs, and the organs which are affected are in this, the main organ, the liver is affected, then we have the pancreas, myocardium, joints are affected, the skin we see the deposition, and the glands like the pituitary gland, adrenal, thyroid, and parathyroid glands, we have the deposition of the hemosiderin. Now we'll see the each organ, what changes occur in them. So when we see the changes in the liver, normally the liver will have the iron content of less than 1000 micrograms per gram dry weight of the liver. So when there is a hemochromatosis, there is increased deposition of the hemosiderin. So because of deposition of the hemosiderin in the hepatocytes, the size of the hepatocyte will increase and even the entire liver will increase. So along with that, because of deposition of hemosiderin, the liver appears chocolate brown in color. And in the hemochromatosis, more than 10,000 micrograms per gram dry weight of the liver will be present. Now, as the hemosiderin is getting deposited, then as I told you, we'll have a free radical injury. So we have a lipid peroxidation because of the free radicals causing the cell damage, necrosis, and then there will be fibrosis. So that leads to the cirrhosis. And the cirrhosis which we see in the hemochromatosis is micronodular cirrhosis. Whereas these free radicals and the iron, they may also interact with the DNA, directly leading to the hepatocellular carcinomas. So we have two final stages in the liver. Either the person can develop the cirrhosis and he can go into the liver failure, or he may develop the hepatocellular carcinoma. And cirrhosis we see when the accumulation is more than 22,000 micrograms per gram dry weight of the liver. That's about the liver. Now this is a gross photograph. You can see it's a chocolate brown in color in the initial stages, where you have the enlargement of the liver with the rounded borders. Later we have the damage to the liver and we have the fibrosis. It becomes even the black in color. So it is you can see the nodules, and all these are the fibrous bands which are present in between the nodules. This is the end stage. And the special stains what we use is the Prussian blue stain. We use Pearl's Prussian blue. So this is a H&D stain where you are seeing the hepatocytes, and in the hepatocyte cytoplasm you are seeing this brown pigment. So this pigment is nothing but the hemosiderin which is deposited. Now when we do the stain, iron stain, that is a Pearl's Prussian blue, that all this hemosiderin, it turns out to be blue. Now we see it in the hepatocytes and also in the Kupffer cells. Now this is in the cirrhosis. You have a regenerating nodule and you have an increased fibrosis, and the regenerating nodule with the hepatocytes, they are having lots of hemosiderin which has come out to be blue by the Pearl's Prussian blue. Now that was about the liver, what we have seen. Then what happens in the pancreas? Pancreas also we have interstitial fibrosis with the parenchymal atrophy. Here we have the deposition both in the exocrine pancreas, which is constituted by the acinine, and the endocrine pancreas, which is by the islet cells. So when you have a deposition in the islet cells and destruction of the islet cells, the patient will develop type 1 diabetes. And when you have a deposition in the exocrine pancreas, in the acinine, then the patient will have the malabsorption because the enzymes are not properly released by the pancreas. So the patient will develop malabsorption, and he will develop the type 1 diabetes mellitus when you have the deposition of hemosiderin in the pancreas. Now what happens in the heart is even the hemosiderin gets deposited in the cardiomyocyte. So when you have a deposition, there is an increase in the size. So you have an enlarged heart with cardiomyopathy, and even here we can have the fibrosis and deposition of this hemosiderin affecting the conduction system that can cause arrhythmias. So finally the patient will present with the cardiomyopathy, or he can present with the arrhythmias. Then the remaining organs, he will have a bronze colored skin because of deposition of the hemosiderin and the dermal macrophages, so that the skin appears bronze colored or the slate gray color. And when we come to the joint, we have the deposition of the iron in the synovium. So this can cause acute synovitis. Later the patient will develop the degenerative joint disease. And coming to the gonads, the patient will have the testicular atrophy. This is because we have the deposition of hemosiderin in the pituitary. So there is a derangement of hypothalamic pituitary axis, resulting in the decreased production of the gonadotrophin and the testosterone. So this will affect the testis, producing the small and atrophic testis. And in the woman, she will present with the amenorrhea. Now this is the bronze skin, what I was telling, somewhat darkly pigmented skin when compared to the normal skin. So clinical features, most commonly how the patient presents is he presents with the triad. That is the triad of micronodular cirrhosis, skin pigmentation, and type 1 diabetes due to the pancreatic fibrosis. So as the patient is having the diabetes and the bronze skin, the name bronze diabetes has been given to this hemochromatosis because he has a bronze colored skin and he has a diabetes. They call it as a bronze diabetes. And the other clinical manifestations, it depends upon which organ is affected. Now, if the liver is affected, the patient will have hepatomegaly and abdominal pain. And if the pancreas, then he has a deranged glucose hemostasis and diabetes mellitus. If the heart is affected, he'll have arrhythmias, cardiomyopathies. And if the joints are involved, then you have atypical arthritis. And if the pituitary is involved, then the patient will have the hypogonadism. And usually in these patients, liver is the organ which is most commonly affected. So death occurs usually by the cirrhosis or cardiac disease. As I told you, the patient may develop arrhythmias and cardiomyopathy. So death can be because of this cardiac disease also. So risk of hepatocellular carcinoma in this patient is 200 folds greater than in the general population. Now, what are the investigations to be done in this? So we have to see the serum iron levels. These patients will have very high levels of serum iron and the ferritin. Along with that, there is an increased percentage of transferrin saturation. It will be more than 60%, and there will be decreased total iron binding capacity. And when we are doing this, we have to take the history from the patient that he has, whether he had any previous blood transfusion or the iron therapy, in order to exclude the secondary hemochromatosis. And the liver biopsy, this is the gold standard for the diagnosis. And the screening of the family members can be done because it is an inherited disorder. So treatment for hemochromatosis is, the best treatment is phlebotomy. Regularly the patient has to bleed to reduce his iron overload. So removing some amount of the blood, and which will be replaced by the fluids. So regular phlebotomy decreases the iron overload, and the patient also can be given the drug treatment. They gave the iron chelators, deferoxamine, which combines with the iron, and it helps in the excretion of the iron through the urine, so that there will be decrease in the iron overload. So this is the treatment. Then the condition called neonatal hemochromatosis. Now this neonatal hemochromatosis is not an inherited disease, but this occurs in the neonates because the fetus has damage to the liver in utero itself. So in utero, you have a liver damage because of the maternal alloimmune injury. So when there is a damage of the liver in utero, obviously the production of the hepcidin is affected, and the neonate, he develops the hemochromatosis. And slowly he'll develop all the features of the hemochromatosis, but this is not an inherited disorder. And this can be detected by the buccal mucosal biopsy, and the treatment for this is the liver transplantation. And secondary hemochromatosis, here we have the causes we have is parenteral iron overload. If the person receives more blood transfusions iron dextrin injections or long-term hemodialysis, he may develop iron overload. And if the patient has ineffective erythropoiesis with the hemolysis, now beta thalassemia, sideroblastic anemia, and pyruvate kinase deficiency, in this you have ineffective erythropoiesis, but the lysis is more. So lots of iron is released into the circulation, but that amount of the iron cannot be utilized in the erythropoiesis. So the iron starts depositing. And another one is increased oral intake of the iron. This we see in the African countries, what we call it as Bantu cirrhosis. This is a condition where in the Africa, what they do is they brew the bear in the homes itself by keeping them in the big iron pots. So they keep the bear in the big iron pots, and lots of iron will be present in the bear. So when they drink the bear, they develop the iron overload. This is what we call it as Bantu cirrhosis. And patients with congenital transfuronemia, and in the chronic liver disease also, where the hepatocytes are damaged. So when hepatocytes are damaged, the hepcidin production will be affected. So when hepcidin production is affected, obviously the absorption of the iron is also affected. So that is about the hemochromatosis, where we have discussed about primary hemochromatosis, neonatal hemochromatosis, and secondary hemochromatosis. Thank you, friends. Thank you for listening patiently.